Have you ever been too late for something? Have you ever arrived somewhere you wanted or needed to go only to find that the door had been shut and that would not open for you? Could have been a train, could have been a symphony concert where they close the doors until intermission, and if you arrive late, you're out of luck. That happened to me once, and I was fairly surprised that they actually enforced that rule, but that's how it works. The classic example of running late for something and finding that the door is shut is, of course, airplanes. Getting to your gate and finding that you just missed it. In my last sermon, I talked about Larry David and Curb Your Enthusiasm, and today's text seemed to provide me another opportunity to tell another delightful story about Larry David and his life. In this episode, Larry is running to catch his flight, and he gets to the gate, and he just sees the door closing. So he says, "Hey, hold that door, hold that door." And the gate agent says, "Oh, I'm so sorry." He says, "That's my flight to Los Angeles." And she says, "I'm so sorry, you just missed it." He says, "I'm on that flight. Look, I made the plane, I'm here." "You were so close, but unfortunately the door is locked and closed. You're not letting me on the plane? I know it's frustrating, but once the door closes, that's it. Federal regulations. Please let me in here. This is so ridiculous. I can see the plane right there." But really, it's as if the plane is not right there. "What are you, a magician?" "No, but the door is locked." "I see the plane. If you're doing a trick, it's not a very good trick." "I'm trying my best to accommodate you." "It doesn't seem like it. You're not golden ruling it. You're not doing unto others as you would have them do unto you." "Unfortunately, the golden rule is not a federal regulation." Golden rule trumps everything. Golden rule on top, then federal regulations. When I was in college, I had a professor who had a 12-minute rule. He said if you were up to 12 minutes late to his class, he did not care. But if you were more than 12 minutes late, he would lock the door and would not let you in. And this was a real rule that he would enforce. And I know somebody who was always on the edge of missing it, but always seemed to make it just in time. I'm sure we've all had close calls of these sorts at the very least. You know, white-knuckling it through traffic, watching the clock and the ETA on our GPS, running to catch a train or a plane, adrenaline pumping as we are waiting to get through airport security, perhaps only to find that we are too late, that the door is shut, that we missed the boat, or the train, or the plane, or the party, the concert, or opportunity in life, a life opportunity. This sort of thing happens to the best of us. I saw a video of Paul McCartney a few years ago being denied entry to a Grammys after party, if you can believe that. He was not only himself, Sir Paul McCartney, but he was with Beck, another mega popular musician, and the sadly recently departed Taylor Hawkins of the Foo Fighters. This is a power trio. Who wouldn't want them at your Grammys after party? And the bouncer wouldn't let them in. I don't know why. But anyway, it happens to the best of us. There are different reasons why we might find ourselves too late or shut out of things. When I was in college, I missed a job interview because I got stuck in an elevator. In Larry David's case, he says he was late for his plane because, as he says, "I got caught up watching this movie in the hotel, Arabesque, with Sophia Loren and Gregory Peck." And not a very good reason. In other words, sometimes the reasons are beyond our control, such as getting stuck in an elevator, and other times, not so much, such as with Larry David watching the Sophia Loren and Gregory Peck movie in his hotel. Today we hear Jesus tell a parable about 10 bridesmaids waiting to go to a wedding banquet. In the end, 5 get in, but 5 do not. The reason that the 5 are shut out, the ones who are shut out, is that in Jesus' words, they are foolish. They are not prepared. Of the 5 who get in, well, Jesus says that they are wise. The bridesmaids, they're all waiting on the bridegroom to show up, for the wedding banquet to begin. Now, it is nighttime during this parable. It might seem strange to us for a wedding banquet to be taking, or at least beginning, at night, but in those days, and indeed in many places in the Middle East today, you will see torchlit wedding processions taking place well into the evening. So therefore, the bridesmaids, they all have lamps so that they can see, oil lamps. The wise bridesmaids, they brought extra oil with them, but the foolish bridesmaids only have the oil that was currently in their lamps. And the bridegroom is delayed in coming because he's got to travel and make certain stops. This is a standard part of these wedding processions, and who doesn't want to talk to the bridegroom? So he's slowed down. And therefore the bridesmaids get drowsy, and they fall asleep. But then suddenly, the bridegroom is there. It's midnight. Look, the bridegroom is here. Come out to meet him. The 5 foolish bridesmaids at this point find that they are out of oil. So they ask the wise ones to share some of their oil. But the wise ones, they say no, because there will not be enough for both of us. So they go to buy some more, which for me raises the very interesting question of what oil dealer is open at midnight. But perhaps if you live in a society where there are wedding banquets happening at midnight, and you need oil lamps for these banquets, you could do some business. So they go to buy some more oil. But it's too late. Jesus says that when they went to buy oil, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went with him into the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later, other bridesmaids came also, saying, "Lord, Lord, open to us." But he replied, "Truly I tell you, I do not know you." In this parable about wise and foolish bridesmaids, Jesus is drawing on the Jewish wisdom tradition. In the Old Testament, there are a number of texts that are commonly grouped together as the wisdom books. These are the book of Job, the Psalms, the book of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, the Song of Songs, the Wisdom of Solomon, and Ecclesiasticus. In the book of Proverbs, we see wisdom and folly personified as 2 different women, which lends itself naturally to today's parable about foolish bridesmaids and wise bridesmaids. Jesus was steeped in this wisdom tradition. It pervades his teaching all throughout Matthew and indeed all throughout the other Gospels. So how does Jesus define wisdom? Well, to give a thorough inventory, this would be a much longer sermon. But fear not, I'll try to be succinct. For a start, we might look at how today's wisdom teaching echoes other parts of Matthew's Gospel, other things that Jesus says in Matthew's Gospel. In chapter 7, at the very end of the Sermon on the Mount, perhaps Jesus' greatest wisdom teaching, he says, "Everyone who hears these words of mine and acts on them will be like a wise person who built their house on rock. The rain fell, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall, because it had been founded on rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act on them will be like a foolish person who built their house on sand. The rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell, and great was its fall." So it seems that to be wise is to hear Jesus' words and act on them. And to be unwise or foolish is to hear Jesus' words and not act on them. It sounds pretty simple. Again, in today's parable, the foolish bridesmaids, after the door is shut, come late, and they say, "Lord, Lord, open to us." But he replies, "Truly I tell you, I do not know you." Just before the end of the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says this very similar thing concerning self-deception and hypocrisy. He says, "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only those who do the will of my Father in heaven. To those who do not, I will declare to them, 'I never knew you.'" See the parallel here. It's a very similar passage. Jesus is saying that to be wise is to act on his words and to do the will of God, and that this is the way to enter the kingdom of heaven. Jesus compares the kingdom of heaven to a wedding banquet here in this parable and in one earlier parable in Matthew's Gospel. fittingly titled The Parable of the Wedding Banquet, which I preached on about 4 weeks ago. It's the one where there's a wedding banquet and there's somebody there who doesn't have the wedding robe on, and so they're thrown out. Pretty extreme, and we talked about what that might mean in that sermon. The image of the kingdom as a wedding banquet and Jesus as the bridegroom is also found elsewhere in the New Testament. John the Baptist calls Jesus the bridegroom in John chapter 3. St. Paul talks about promising the church in Corinth to Christ as a bride, to a bridegroom in marriage in the second letter to the Corinthians. The book of Revelation speaks about the marriage of the Lamb and the church as the bride. The wedding banquet, in addition to having this collective sense of the marriage of the church to Christ, also has an inward, even mystical meaning of the marriage of Christ to the soul in the depths of our being. This is what we were created for. It is the greatest joy available. It is the fulfillment of our deepest hunger and longing. But too many of us are too concerned and caught up in outward things to seek it, to be ready for it, to even recognize that we are hungry for it. The image of the wedding banquet for the kingdom was prevalent also in the early church, in the ancient church. Among those who talked about the church and Christian life in these terms, it was thought that the goal of Christian life is this marriage of Christ to the soul, again in the depths of our being. The Song of Songs, the erotic poem of the Old Testament, was interpreted as a symbol for this inner mystery, this inward union. And from this union comes the birth of Christ in our soul, in our being, in our personality. This is wholeness. This is freedom. A 4th century Christian writer wrote of those in whom this marriage takes place. He said, "The Word, that is the Logos, the Christ, the Son of God, is stamped upon them and begotten in them by a true knowledge and faith, so that in each one Christ is spiritually born. The church swells and travails in birth until Christ is formed in us, so that each of the saints, by partaking of Christ, has been born a Christ." That each of the saints, by partaking of Christ, has been born a Christ. This is a very strong way of putting it, but one that was very common in the early church, so much so that C.S. Lewis, who himself was very influenced by these early Christian theologians, could say in his classic book, Mere Christianity, that the church exists for no reason other than to make small Christs. This is what we were created for. This is the wedding banquet we are invited to. So let us not delay or become distracted or dispersed by the many demands pulling us in other directions. Let us not find that we are too late, that we have missed our chance, because we only have this one precious life to love and to live like Christ. And we don't know how long we have. And even in a very long life, seasons pass. Our kids grow up, people move away or move on or pass away, and of course, ultimately, all things must pass. Our time here is limited. So let us be like the wise bridesmaids. Let us keep awake and watchful, with our lamps lit, for the coming of Christ among us and within us in the circumstances of our lives, for the opportunities that each day presents to do what Jesus taught us, to love, to forgive, to be kind, to show mercy, to do justice. For all of this will prepare us for the wedding banquet in this life and in the life to come. Amen.